Hauser and the others. Nemec and I will take the bridge. Fireball?
The boys are back and everything is converging to one path, and that will likely see our beloved Clone Force 99 reunite once more. This episode brought it back in the fiercest of ways, digging back into several subplots set up in the first season of the series, and this installment truly pushes things forward as we approach the horizon of this season shutting its doors next week. The sense of euphoria I felt from watching this episode is the closest feeling I've had to being drunk since I quit drinking. This one lifts you up and drops you back down, plus delivers an unmistakable direction for one of our heroes and reunites us with old ones plus friends. Let's not waste any more time. I'm going to break down this bad boy and then tell you what I think by the end. We begin on the planet of Balmora, where we see a returning Captain Hauser and two of his men being transported to Mount Tantus, when, as they depart the planet, they're interrupted by a vessel containing an assortment of clones, including two of Hauser's squad named Fireball and Nemec, a returning Gregor, and my boy Echo, who have come to retrieve them from the clutches of the Empire. As they surgically infiltrate the ship and take out every TK and retrieve Hauser and co, Echo tries to collect the information on board to determine where they were headed, where unfortunately he's met with a roadblock and can only retrieve a few small fragments of information. Whilst this goes on, Nemec tries to question the commander on deck, who decides to tap out rather than conceding to questioning.
Pussy.
They jettison off the ship and we cut to Crosshair, who's being delivered to Emery, Carr and Dr. Hemlock, who offers Crossy the chance of a new life provided he informs them of how to find Omega. Crosshair rejects this and is tortured for information when we cut back to Coruscant and we see the assortment of troopers inside Trace and Rafa's landing bay, now including Rex and Senator Chuchi. Echo is discussing matters with Hauser and Chuchi when Hauser states that he has no idea where they were being transported to, but that they aren't the first assortment of troops to leave and never come back. Echo believes he can get something from the stolen information and tells them that he can get that by decrypting it using an old friend. We shift back to Crossy, who's nearing his limit, and Emery calls it for now, when he takes the chance to escape by killing every TK in front of him, but spares Emery, who seems to empathise with his plight for now, to which he just stuns her in response. He makes his way to the comms room on base and puts out a red flare to the Batchers, saying Plan 88 and you need to go into hiding, before he gets cut off and recaptured by Hemlock. Cut to Pabu, where we see some time has passed and the Batchers have integrated well within the community, and the question arises from Shep again about whether they'll reconsider staying. It's here where Echo arrives, and after a tearful little reunion between Omega and Echo, he tells them why he's there. After some chatter between Hunter and Echo, which I'll get into shortly, Tech informs them of what he's discovered. We shift briefly back to a returning Tarkin, who's growing concerned that the clones and their betrayal might compromise them, and Hemlock promises to find a solution to this, but it has to be done by the summit. Coincidentally, the title of the next episode. Moving back to Tech, who could only determine that the clones were being delivered to Dr. Hemlock, and that they were being transported to him should they push back against the Empire, and that Crosshair is one of the members of that list. It's here as well that he discovers Crossy's message that has been expanded to include the words "the Seeker," and that they're being hunted. Hunter's hesitant to just accept this, learning from their last encounter with Crosshair on Camino. Then we close on Crosshair back in restraints and offered the choice once more to give up the Batchers, to which he cements his loyalties and remains silent.
You fucking champion!
One thing this episode confirms straight out the gate is, in fact, if you have Crosshair in it this season, it's guaranteed to be a fucking winner. This episode over-delivered in context, continuity and plot progression. This has entered my top 5 for sure, which is becoming bloated now as the series continues to prove why the animation department at Star Wars houses the most consistent group of storytellers. I don't like to be that guy, but I'm going to say it once again. The animated Star Wars content is the best material to come from Disney Star Wars' era right now, and you're a fool to think otherwise. There's a lot to unpack from this week's installment, so let's break it down as such, starting with the clones. I've been saying throughout the season that the clone uprising is on the way, and here we truly see it taking shape. With the return of a lot of faces this week, including Chuchi and Tarkin, but most striking to me was seeing a little more from Gregor in this portion of the timeline and his contributions to the fight so far, but also drawing back to Captain Hauser and his men. We saw that Gregor was retrieved in episode 14 of last season, and that was awesome, but in my opinion it greatly overshadowed the potential for Hauser in the future and what could be done with his story. To see a follow-up to this, however, leaves a lot of questions for me about the future of the clones. In the case of Hauser and his men, the fact that Nemik and Fireball were donning their coloured armour would imply that Rex and Echo retrieved them recently, and they must have come to a consensus on their own about where their allegiances lie, which is awesome to see, as Hauser does inform Chuchi that he was incarcerated with 8 of his men, but only 2 of them survived alongside him. This is undoubtedly a dark period for the clones, as they are living, breathing men who may share the same genetic template, but they have developed their own mindsets, they carry their own thoughts and feelings and want a future, but are instead being tested on, torn apart and repackaged as a weapon against themselves, and their wills are being stripped away from them along with their identities. They're being pushed to the breaking point and simply are not being given the option to decide what will become of them. This is just the beginning of the clone uprising, and as we saw throughout this episode from Gregor, Echo, Nemik, Fireball and Crosshair, the clones continually show the incompetence of the TKs and validate my feelings about the biggest inconsistency to Palpatine's plans and how they began to fail from the beginning, and it all comes back to not utilising the clones.
That is why you fail.
Something of which that Hemlock seemingly agrees with when stating to Tarkin that they should be repurposed rather than decommissioned. A sentiment of which leaves me a little concerned for the fate of one Commander Cody, however, who we last saw in episode 3 of the season, and Rampart would later go on to claim had simply gone AWOL.
Bullshit!
Though Wolf survives to Rebels, and we're yet to see how he makes it out of this alive. So there's hope for the future, but it does look extremely bleak for them right now, with only the strength of a small few keeping them alive, and the stakes have never felt more intense than now. And to see that Chuchi is still involved with this as well reinforces the idea that this battle is being fought from every corner, and I'm grateful we came back to her and establishing how closely involved she is with the situation. Moving on, however, Dr. Hemlock and Dr. Carr. I will admit that Hemlock feels like a legitimate threat against everyone around him now, as he possesses power through his words, and is particularly chilling whenever he enters the room, where it would appear to me at least that Emery Carr is actually fucking shit scared of him. When Crosshair was escaping, she seemed genuinely frightened and not from the blaster in her face. Hemlock carries an uneasiness to him who could potentially have some contingencies lined up in case things escalate. The concern, however, is what would that look like? It was fascinating though to discover that he was previously working for the Republic Science Division but was rejected on grounds of misconduct and malpractice. And it begs the question, what was he up to? Especially with Nala Se due to their familiarity. We received a little more insight into how twisted he is and how nefarious he can be by releasing a toxin to immobilize Crosshair that he's trained himself to ignore. Just proves how far he'll go for science. Regardless, for all his wrongdoings, and the fact that he was basically ostracized due to his unorthodox practices that were considered unethical, the Empire saw value in this, and it just goes to show how fucked up things really are under their regime when they would consider bringing someone like this back. I get the feeling that Hemlock isn't making it out of the season alive, though I could be wrong, but if he does make it out of this, what else could he achieve under the name of the Empire, and in the name of science, something of which also kind of relates to Dr. Pershing that we've just seen return in The Mandalorian. One aspect I loved in this episode was seeing the visible progression within our crew, and drawing back to a previous plot point from season 1, with Omega learning to fly the Marauder. A topic brought up when she was talking to Hera back in the first season, where Tech wouldn't let her fly until she'd learned everything about the Marauder. Then we picked up with this in the beginning of this season, where she's learning about a ton of other ships under Tech's instruction. To also see Tech starting to embrace the understanding of humour, with him documenting Wrecker's full belly last week, and now with Omega mentioning the iconic Tech turn, and he's taking a liking to it, just shows how much of an impact she's had on him and getting him to open up. You can see Omega, Tech and Rekka all starting to accept this new life and making something of themselves beyond the parameters of being a soldier, except for Hunter, who's still caught in the belief that becoming anything other than a soldier or a fighter feels irregular. A similar thought process to Crosshair, but not fighting for the Empire. However, I think he's convinced of what they could do later, having had a talk with Echo, and seeing this burning desire inside of him where Hunter poses the question of when will it be enough? Will Echo ever truly be satisfied in his quest? Echo admittedly did lose a lot of time during the war, and his goal to save his brothers is undoubtedly true, but there's a possible longing or call to arms for him. To unknowingly continue the work of his brother Fives that sparked this independent thinking among the clones, and do right by everyone that was wronged from the Empire, and I have a feeling that this could lead Echo to the road less travelled. Hopefully it goes a different direction though, and he returns back to the Batchers. But he's found his independence, and in a way they all have now, with all of them wearing their armour less and less, and Rekka completely switching his up just to act as part of his style now. As we step over that finish line into the finale now, you know that the finale is going to be an emotionally charged event that could see wins and losses, and I can't say I'm ready, but regardless, we best prepare ourselves for the crew's biggest fight yet. This was a solid showing from the Batchers, and for me takes the crown back from Mando this week, with the incredible writing, gorgeous visuals and consistent plot threads that make this feel like a wholesome addition to an underappreciated series. That's all I've got for this week, however. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this week's episode. Leave a like and subscribe to see me finish off my review series for Season 2 next week. And until then everyone, take care and may the Force be with you.